What's up, everybody? This is Apush OG bringing you the best US history content on YouTube. I hope you are all having a wonderful day today. Today, we are going to be learning about the evolution of the First Amendment. One of the most influential amendments and the basis for all of democracy, the First Amendment holds a very special place in my heart. The First Amendment has evolved massively over the country's history as a result of many political, social, and economic factors. The United States is extremely different from when it was first founded, so it is understandable that the amendments are as well. Also, before we begin, I would like to thank all the people who have subscribed to the channel. I put a lot of work into this video, and I appreciate everybody who helps me out so that I can do more videos like these. We have a lot to cover today, so let's get into it. Now, to better understand the history of the United States, let's go way back to the Constitutional Convention in 1787. We had just won the Revolutionary War and had established the Articles of Confederation. However, the articles were not functioning properly because Congress was not given the power to tax and the judicial branch was given way too little power. So, 55 delegates assembled in Philadelphia to decide the future of our country. They ultimately constructed a three-branch national government with a system of checks and balances to make sure that no branch became too powerful. This became the famous document that we know and love today, the U.S. Constitution. So now that we had a stronger government, we needed an official document to protect the people's rights. One of the delegates, James Madison, proposed the Bill of Rights, a series of amendments to warrant a list of 10 inalienable rights to the citizens. The First Amendment specifically is the spirit of democracy. It allows for free speech and free press, which cannot be withheld by the government. It has changed massively in meaning throughout the years as a result of warfare, government scandals, and Supreme Court cases. The Sedition Act was a law passed in 1798 by Congress in anticipation of an awaited war with France. The act made it illegal for citizens to criticize the government. The Sedition Act, however, was seen as a form of government censorship and an expansion of executive power. It was extremely unpopular amongst the citizens because it violated their First Amendment rights. The Sedition Act led to many debates about the meaning of the First Amendment and limitations of the rights. The first major limitation on the First Amendment was by the Espionage Act of 1917. 2 months after the United States had entered World War I, Congress passed the Espionage Act in an attempt to prohibit real espionage by America's enemies. However, many American citizens took this as an attack on their First Amendment rights and a form of nativist sentiment. Citizens who violated the Espionage Act of 1917 faced fines, imprisonment, and even deportation. The Espionage Act created a nationwide standard during wartime and caused a lot of backlash because of its clear violation of First Amendment rights guaranteed under the Constitution. The Espionage Act would be brought up in the Supreme Court case Schenck versus the United States. Charles Schenck, an American socialist, was sued by the United States government for distributing non-cooperation pamphlets during the war. He testified that under the First Amendment, he had the right to freely express his opinions. Ultimately, the Supreme Court declared that the government has a right to limit the First Amendment when there is a clear and present danger. Schenck was found guilty of all charges and was sentenced to 6 months in jail. The Supreme Court case, Schenck versus the United States, was extremely important because it declared that when there was a clear and present danger, the state could constitutionally limit an individual's First Amendment rights. Another extremely important Supreme Court case involving the First Amendment is the case Sullivan versus the New York Times. L.B. Sullivan was an Alabama police commissioner who was suing the New York Times for creating false and defamatory advertisements about his police force. The newspaper published an advertisement describing the mistreatment of African Americans by Sullivan's police force. The Supreme Court declared that the New York Times did not intend to act malignantly and therefore should not be held liable. The freedom of press clause of the First Amendment limits the ability of public officials to sue for libel and allows the media to publish whatever opinion they want. The Supreme Court case, Sullivan versus the New York Times, exhibits the power which the media holds under the Freedom of Press Clause of the First Amendment. The final Supreme Court case, and the most controversial of these three, was the case the New York Times versus the United States. The United States sued the New York Times for releasing the Pentagon Papers, which were government documents on Vietnam. The Supreme Court decided to side with the New York Times. They said that if the government could prove that the documents were in fact classified, that they would side differently, but the documents were already released to the public. This proves that although the First Amendment has changed massively in meaning, the press still has a huge amount of power protected by the amendment. The final instance that we will be looking into involving the First Amendment is a form of fear-mongering created by Senator Joseph McCarthy, which became known as McCarthyism. McCarthy led a campaign against supposed communists, which led to many people losing their job. Many of the people that he claimed to be communists were actually completely innocent. McCarthyism is a great example of why the First Amendment must have limitations. Without limitations, it would allow for people such as McCarthy to undermine the rights of others. The First Amendment has evolved immensely over the history of our nation. The domestic and foreign issues which we have faced in our history means that the government has to modify the rights protected under the First Amendment. The Supreme Court cases Sullivan versus the New York Times versus the United States, and Schenck versus the United States all display the circumstances in which the First Amendment must be limited, as well as the power of the press under the amendment. The Sedition and Espionage Act both demonstrate government limitations of the amendment during wartime. Finally, McCarthyism is a great example of why the government must limit freedom of speech at times. The First Amendment is an extremely complicated and important amendment for democracy. The history of the First Amendment and the changes which it has endured are extremely extensive. Our history lesson has just touched on the vast examples of government limitations of the First Amendment, but I think we got a lot done anyways. That's all I have time for today. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you'll be reminded when I post again. I thank you all for being with me today, and I hope that you enjoyed learning about the history of the First Amendment with me. So I'll see you all in the next one.